On the record this week, a mad dash to push ahead priorities at the Georgia Capitol.
This is not a perfect solution.
This is a bad bill.
Everyday Georgians telling us, y'all have got to do something about these property taxes.
Lawmakers weigh in on the work that still needs to be done.
The fate of a crowded race now in the hands of voters. Northwest Georgians head to the polls in the race to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress.
And Democrats already looking ahead to 2028.
Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
And Georgia lawmakers in the final stretch of the 2026 legislative season after pushing past a critical deadline. Good Sunday morning. I'm Rick Fulbaugh.
And I'm Doug Reardon. Thanks for joining us live this week. We appreciate you being here. Cost of living concerns coming back into focus during critical moments at the Georgia Capitol. Last week, lawmakers faced the crossover day deadline, that all-important day in the 40-day legislative session where bills must pass either out of the House or the Senate. Hundreds of bills were brought to the floor for votes. Many of them passed and still have a chance of becoming law. Many others failed to get enough support and are now considered dead.
One of those failed efforts included another push to legalize sports betting here in Georgia. H.R. 450 would have put a measure on your ballot in November, creating an opportunity for you to decide whether or not to allow gambling on sports here in Georgia. The legislation had support from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who argued that Georgia is missing out on millions of dollars in potential tax revenue from sports betting. But others argued the risks and addictive nature of gambling outweigh the financial benefits.
It seems like one of those things we see every year. But another push to protect you from paying for Georgia's data center boom did cross over. Friday, lawmakers in the Senate approved a bill that would end the state's sales tax break for new data centers. The bill also outlines lawmakers' intent to ensure that residential ratepayers won't end up footing the bill for the massive electricity demand from those facilities. Senators who voted against the measure said the legislation didn't go far enough to make sure that those costs aren't passed on to you.
Two bills loosening regulations on gun silencers saw different outcomes in the House and the Senate Friday night. The devices designed to reduce the sound of gunfire are currently banned from use here in Georgia. Republican supporters of the bill said the measure was mostly a legal cleanup, but opponents argued lawmakers should be focusing on gun safety instead. After a long debate, the vote on that bill failed in the House, but a measure that closely mirrored it was approved over in the Senate.
And a vote on a controversial elections bill also failed in the Senate. Senate Bill 568 would have created new limits on where Georgians are allowed to vote early, assigning them to just one precinct in their county. It also would have required counties to publicly post their voter rolls prior to an election, and it would have moved Georgia over to a hand-marked paper ballot system instead of the currently used touchscreens. Republican supporters of the measure say it would have moved Georgia to a more secure system that falls in line with similar ones used across the country. They noted Florida, to be specific. Democrats voted in opposition, arguing the financial cost and the timing associated with making those changes outlined in the bill would have potentially been heaped onto individual counties. And I spoke to Republican sponsor Greg Dolezal right after that vote. He said he may try to include measures of that bill in a different piece of legislation, creating what's known as a zombie bill or a vehicle. He told us he feels this is what needs to change most urgently about Georgia's election system.
So the hand-marked paper ballot piece is really the key provision. We want to get off the machines by November, and there are other elements we'd be willing to negotiate on. Like I said, this is not a perfect bill. We're not married to everything in the bill.
We may not have seen the last of that one, but a different Republican priority did make it over the finish line in the House after a big setback earlier in the week.
Yeah, it's a measure that would lead to the elimination of property taxes for homeowners in Georgia. Republicans say eliminating property taxes could save families thousands of dollars a year. It was initially introduced as a constitutional amendment, which requires a supermajority for passage.
Democrats argue that it would also cut the #1 source of funding for many schools and other essential services. They voted to block it on Tuesday, but on Friday night, Republican leaders brought a new version of the bill that only requires a simple majority on the House floor, and then they immediately put it up for a vote. It's a key part of the push to lower the cost of living for families all across Georgia.
A family just starting out, an older lady who lives alone on fixed income, or an older farmer trying to hold on to their family farm. Those are the everyday Georgians telling us, y'all have got to do something about these property taxes.
This is a bad bill because we don't know what's in here and we don't understand the impact Is this how the majority party governs?
And joining us now, our panel, Republican State Senator Drew Echols, who represents Georgia's 49th District, and Democratic State Representative Esther Panich, who represents Georgia's 51st District. Thank you both for joining us live and going on the record. We know you had a late night on Friday night. We all lost an hour of sleep because of the time change, so thank you for coming in. Let me start with you, Representative Panich, because when it comes to these taxes going away, the revenue, a lot of Democrats are concerned about the impact that could have on services that we all rely on. What do you think about this, and what is it going to mean for taxpayers here in Georgia?
To us, the property tax bill was like a shell game. You want to make it sound like you're helping affordability by taking away property taxes over 10 years, but what it really does is end up defunding law enforcement, schools, all the essential services that we all pay for with our taxes and that we need. So there was an additional layer to that, which is that this bill was kind of dropped on us. It's a thick bill, and there were revisions through the night on Friday, and so none of us could really take into account what was happening in real time. I will say that I represent 3 cities in my district, and one is a Republican mayor and 2 Democratic mayors, and the Republican, none of them wanted this bill. None of them, and they are on the ground with essential services. So I take my lead from if a bipartisan group says no, when it would be in their interest to say yes, then I take it very, very seriously.
Yeah, and Senator, we've been talking about this collision course that what you all are trying to do in the Senate with income tax and eliminating that for Georgians, and the House's effort to eliminate property taxes. Now this is real, right? This is in your hands now. What do you think will happen with this property tax bill?
Well, I think, we had already passed part of that bill with capping the 3%. I think there's some options in there with some sales tax. I know my email blows up, as I'm sure yours does too. That seems to be a huge issue. It's a tax on unrealized gains, and this is a step in the right direction of trying to fix this, and giving these local communities, it's met with a mixed bag. I've got some local leaders who are against it as well, but I think that a lot of them are going to be able to make up the revenue with that 1 cent, with that extra penny, and we got to make living in Georgia affordable. Some of these taxes have gone up 80+% over the past 4 years on a house and an acre of land, and it's crazy.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we hear the complaints too from people that we're talking to, but I appreciate that. Moving on to elections now, right? We had that Senate bill that failed to get the constitutional requisite that it needed. And we heard Senator Dolezal say he might try to revive it, bring it through something that has already passed. That means you guys would very likely see it. There didn't seem to be the appetite in the Senate, at least, to pass that bill, right? What do you think will happen if that does show up in the House?
I think it'll probably meet a similar fate in failing. One of the biggest problems it has is that it has a July 1st, 2026 start date, which is in the middle of our elections. It's going to be impossible for the election boards to be ready for hand count paper ballots for that quickly. You're talking about election boards without the funding to do this and without the time. This is too important to just be haphazard with, and so I expect it would not, if it even makes it to the floor of the House, I don't expect that it would carry.
Senator, you were nodding your head when Representative Panich was talking about the dates here, because ramming this through and having it be in effect so quickly, couldn't that open the door to exactly the kinds of problems that Republicans who want to support this legislation are trying to fix?
Well, I think so, but you heard Senator Dolezal say it wasn't a perfect bill. That date in there, it was definitely an attention grabber, if nothing else. And I think it's just, that was put in there to get the Secretary of State's office to move. They haven't moved in years on legislation that's already in law. I understand that you guys maybe next week are going to be talking. I don't think we're done talking about elections here. We may have hit crossover day, but we're going to be talking about elections the coming weeks. And I know you guys had a study committee that looked over that all over the state of Georgia, and I look forward to seeing, what they unveil.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it, guys. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. Next on the record, Election Day is Tuesday in the Northwest Georgia race to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene. We'll talk about it.
This week, voters in Northwest Georgia will choose the replacement for Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress.
Yeah, it's a big week. Those voters will go to the polls on Tuesday to cast their ballots in a special election. It's happening in the state's 14th congressional district. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned her seat from there in the U.S. House back in January after months of disagreements publicly with Republicans in Congress and after President Donald Trump withdrew his support of Greene, his once close ally.
17 people, including about a dozen Republican candidates, are running to fill Greene's seat, representing one of Georgia's most conservative districts. With so many names on the ballot, a runoff is all but certain, and it's already on the books, a date anyway, for April 7th. But whoever wins will only serve out the rest of Greene's current term through January. If they want to keep the job beyond that, they'll have to run in May's primary for the full 2-year term and then face voters again in November's general election. Atlanta News First has sat down with several of the candidates in that special election on the record, and you can watch those interviews right now on our YouTube channel.
And it's not just that race that we're watching this week. Voters across Georgia are heading to the polls Tuesday to decide who will fill a few empty seats in the Georgia legislature. That includes Metro Atlanta and Northwest Georgia. 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat are fighting to secure the support of voters in Chattooga, Floyd, Walker, and Catoosa and Dade counties. Colton Moore resigned that seat when he launched his campaign for Congress for that 14th district seat back in January. 4 Democrats are fighting to win over voters in Metro Atlanta. Karen Bennett resigned her seat in the State House in District 94 in January, shortly before pleading guilty to charges associated with pandemic unemployment fraud. House District 94 stretches across Gwinnett and DeKalb counties.
Those special elections happening this week as we continue to count down to midterm primary elections, and we now know exactly who will be on your ballot in May. Georgia candidates running from statewide office, federal and local elections filed into the Capitol last week to officially put their names on the ballot. And we saw candidates for U.S. Senate, State House, Secretary of State, and Governor under the Gold Dome last week. We also saw several surprises during the qualifying period. Sharon Henderson, a state representative from Covington, opted not to run for re-election for her seat in the Georgia House. Instead, she is running for State Senate District 43. Henderson was suspended by Governor Brian Kemp in January after pleading not guilty to pandemic fraud allegations.
And State Representative Syra Draper is also leaving her seat in the Georgia House. She is now running for the District 44 seat over in the Georgia Senate. Draper filed paperwork to run for Senate after DeKalb County State Senator Elena Parent announced her retirement from the legislature. And another lawmaker leaving her seat behind in that chamber, Senator Nabila Parks, made a surprise entrance into the race for lieutenant governor, abandoning her previously announced bid for insurance commissioner. Parks is one of more than half a dozen candidates current and former lawmakers now running for lieutenant governor.
And Atlanta News First is your election authority. You can scan the code on your screen to download our free app and get up-to-the-minute notifications from the campaign trail sent directly to your phone.
All right, panel's back now, so we're going to make you guys talk elections because you knew we were going to do that. So, we heard the House leader on Friday night during crossover day say that there was a big blue wave coming. She talked about making up big, minorities and deficits in numbers that Democrats had in the House and the Senate. Do you see that as the case? Because, glimmer of hope, maybe with some public service commission races that we saw in recent past, some House seats that we saw flip in recent past. Do you think that's a sign?
I think it's a good sign. However, we always have to run like we're behind. You cannot expect any wave to come. I'd love to be surprised, happily surprised, but you can't rely on it and you can't think that way because then turnout drops. So as far as I'm concerned, we're going to run through that tape, but we're running from behind.
So cautious optimism from your colleague on the other side of the aisle. What about as far as how are Republicans feeling about this? Because history tells us that the party that's not in the White House does better in the midterm elections. And so Democrats are expected to pick up seats. Here statewide, there are healthy majorities in both chambers for Republicans. Do you see a shift? Are you sensing anything?
I don't know. It depends on how much, some of these statewide candidates dump into the races. They could pull down ballot tickets up. But, we feel good that we've got a good record to run on as Republicans. We lowered taxes, lowered income taxes years in a row now. It's a great place to live, work, and play. And that's been Republican policies that have done this over the past 20 years.
The 14th district, we've just talked about that election coming up this week, and we know that President Trump has weighed in, endorsing Clay Fuller in that race to take over the remaining term of Marjorie Taylor Greene. He came here a couple of weeks back. I just wonder, as a Democrat sitting and watching all of that play out, and there are some Democrats who perhaps could sneak in and find themselves in this runoff, perhaps in the 14th. But what do you think about this? What does this say about Georgia and the importance that Georgia plays in the national political scene, that there's so much attention on this race?
It's a fascinating race. It's fascinating for the way we got here, that Marjorie Taylor Greene split with President Trump and then just left. So there's just a lot going on here. Georgia's always in the top of the states that matter. Because we have 2 Democratic senators, yet we have a Republican governor, and Republican majority in the House and Senate. So I'm very excited to see. I don't know that President Trump will have the same pull that he has had previously. I think people are really tired of the president and knowing he's on his way out. I don't know how much longer they're going to stick by him. But also, Georgia has a history, thank God, of standing up to the president. So even by Republicans. So I'm not sure how much influence he will have on this election, but it's quite a race to have that many Republicans for that runoff.
Yeah, and I think it would. We know that the president's endorsement isn't always the golden seal for elections, but when we talk about both of your roles, right, as serving during an election year, are you sensing anything in the Senate? Because we have a lot of lieutenant governor candidates, AG candidates. We have a gubernatorial candidate leading that chamber. How do things change for you all in an election year?
I'm going to go way up the seniority line.
Don't say anything that's going to get you in trouble.
Well, no. Well, right now, President Trump and Governor Brian Kemp are the 2 most popular elected officials in the state of Georgia right now, anybody. And I think, President Trump's looking for, when he endorses somebody, he's looking for somebody with proven results, and that's what he's done here. And listen, I think that's what voters are looking for, too. When they go to the ballot, are they looking at endorsements? Yes and no. I mean, they really want people who have done something, who have accomplished something when they go to the ballot box. And I think that's what's going to tell the tale here in these special elections.
All right, stand by, both of you, please. Coming up next on The Record, Atlanta's in the running once again. Democratic leaders nationally eyeing our city ahead of the 2028 presidential election.
All right, welcome back. The midterms are starting to take shape. We're almost there, but Democrats are already looking ahead to 2028. Last week, the Democratic National Committee named Atlanta as a finalist, top 5, in their search for a host city for the 2028 Democratic National Convention. Atlanta was also in the running to host the 2024 convention, but the DNC selected Chicago instead. So Boston, Chicago again, Denver, and Philadelphia are also in the running at this point. So Representative Panish, a lot of people, I think, were kind of upset with the DNC in 2024 for not bringing that convention to the South. It was kind of one of those areas where you really needed to drum up a lot of support, a lot of attention. Do you think that now is another good time to bring the convention back to the South in 2028?
I hope so. We're tired of being bridesmaids. We were ready to be the bride. So I hope it's in Atlanta. It would be a great thing for our city, and it shores up the blueness of the metro area in Atlanta. We're a perfect place to have this convention, and I really hope it's here.
Well, even members of the opposing party are in favor of these big conventions coming to our town because of the money that they can bring in.
Well, mine's twofold. I do chair economic development and tourism, and I'm tourism all across the state of Georgia with a special committee this past year. So yes, I absolutely welcome the Democratic Party, but I think this is a shot in the arm for the Republican Party. It's a chance for us to step up. It's going to motivate our folks to say this is not a purple state. I really believe that it could be, used the other way. It could go the other way. So I welcome them.
Along those lines, real quick, just a couple of seconds. What kind of candidate do you think the Republicans are going to nominate in 2028? Somebody in the mold of Donald Trump, a MAGA Republican, or a more traditional Republican?
For president?
Yes.
I think he's probably somewhere in the cabinet right now. Probably his last name maybe Rubio.
Yeah,
he's
I don't
doing a lot.
disagree.
He's doing a lot, and he's getting a lot of respect worldwide.
All right, well, we want to thank our guests. Thank you both for coming in. State Representative Esther Panich, State Senator Drew Echols, thank you for coming in on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, and thank you as always for watching and joining us live here this week. We'll see you next Sunday.
Yes, ma'am.